It started as a glitch, a flicker in reality that only I seemed to notice. When I looked at people, small, digital numbers floated above their heads. At first I thought it was stress. Maybe I was hallucinating from lack of sleep. The numbers were precise: minutes, hours, days, a strange, persistent overlay on my vision. I tried to ignore it, rubbing my eyes, convinced it would go away. But it didn't. It only got clearer. I was on my way to work, trying to read a book, but the numbers were too distracting. An old man across from me had a timer that read 3 days, 14 hours, and 22 minutes. The woman next to him, engrossed in her phone, had over 40 years. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. What did these numbers mean? The logical part of my brain was screaming, "This isn't real, Noah." But a deeper, more primal part felt a chilling certainty. The first confirmation was subtle, yet terrifying. I was in a coffee shop, waiting for my order. A man in a sharp suit was yelling into his phone, his face red with frustration. His timer was low, dangerously low. It read 0 hours, 2 minutes, and 17 seconds. I watched, mesmerized and horrified, as the seconds ticked down. I wanted to look away, to pretend I wasn't seeing it, but I couldn't. He finished his call, grabbed his coffee, and stormed towards the door. The timer hit 0 just as he stepped onto the street. A bus, running a red light, swerved to avoid another car. The man never saw it coming. The crowd gasped. I just stood there, my own coffee growing cold, the truth settling in like a block of ice. I wasn't just seeing numbers, I was seeing their end. The days that followed were a living nightmare. Every face was a ticking clock. I saw timers everywhere, from decades to mere seconds. I saw a young boy with only a few weeks left and felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to lean against a wall. I saw an elderly woman with 15 years and felt a confusing sense of relief. It was an unbearable burden, a knowledge I never asked for. I tried to tell my friend Mark, but he just laughed it off. "Dude, you need a vacation. You're working too much," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. His timer read 52 years, 8 months, 3 days, blissfully unaware. Then came the train incident. It was rush hour, the carriage packed tight with bodies. I was squished into a corner, trying to avoid looking at anyone, but my eyes landed on a woman reading a paperback. Her timer was blinking, 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 3 seconds. I held my breath. 2, 1, 0. The moment it hit 0, she didn't collapse, she didn't scream, she vanished, just blinked out of existence. The people around her didn't notice. The man who had been standing next to her simply had more room now. He shifted his weight, oblivious. No one screamed. No one seemed to realize a person had just been erased from reality. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't death. This was something else, something worse. That's when I discovered the other part of this curse. I was walking through a park, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. I saw a little girl crying because she'd dropped her ice cream. On instinct, I knelt down, offered her a kind smile, and bought her a new one. As she grinned up at me, a flash of light caught my eye. Her timer, which had been at 78 years, suddenly jumped up by a few seconds. I blinked. Did that just happen? I tried it again. I held a door open for a man, and as he thanked me, his timer flickered and increased by a fraction of a second. A smile, a kind word, a small act of generosity. It added time. The flip side was just as true. I accidentally bumped into someone, spilling their coffee. As they shot me a furious glare, I saw their timer drop by a full minute. A harsh word, an argument, an act of selfishness. It took time away. I was a veritable. My interactions were changing the equation. Suddenly, the weight I felt wasn't just from seeing the timers, but from the terrifying realization that I could influence them. I could play God, one tiny interaction at a time. But who was I to decide who deserved more time? The responsibility was crushing me. One morning, I finally gathered the courage to look in the mirror. I'd been avoiding my own reflection, terrified of what I might see. Would it be minutes, hours? I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and then opened them. Above my own head, where a timer should have been, were 2 words in stark, block letters. Unassigned. Not a number, not a countdown, just unassigned. What did that even mean? Was I an exception? Was I outside the system? The lack of an answer was somehow more frightening than seeing a low number. It felt like I was in a game where I didn't even know the rules. The unease festered, turning into a constant, gnawing paranoia. I started noticing them a few days later. People with no numbers, none at all. They didn't have timers, They didn't have the unassigned label like me. Their space above their heads was just empty, and they were different. They moved through the crowds, but they weren't part of them. Their gazes were fixed, their expressions blank, and the most terrifying part, they were always looking at me. No matter where I went, I would find one of them in the corner of my eye, their heads slightly tilted, staring directly at me with an unnerving intensity. They never blinked. Last night, it escalated. I was walking home late, the streets mostly empty. I felt the familiar prickle of being watched. I turned, and one of them was standing just a few feet away, under a flickering streetlight. He was tall, dressed in a simple dark coat, but his face was an emotionless mask. He took a step closer, then another. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I was frozen in place. He leaned in, his voice a dry, chilling whisper that scraped against my eardrums. "We don't count down." My world tilted. The whisper seemed to shatter something inside my head. My vision exploded into a blinding static of numbers, billions of them, trillions, flooding my sight, overlapping, flickering, screaming in a silent chorus. The numbers of every person on the planet, all at once. It was an avalanche of data, an overwhelming torrent of final moments that threatened to tear my mind apart. I squeezed my eyes shut, clutching my head, but the numbers were burned onto the back of my eyelids. When I finally managed to pry my eyes open, the world swam back into focus. The man was gone. The torrent of numbers had subsided, returning to the usual single timers above people's heads. But something had changed. A new dread, cold and sharp, pierced through me. I looked up, towards the reflection in a dark shop window, and for the first time, above my own head, a timer had appeared. It wasn't a comforting string of years. It was red, and it was moving fast. The numbers were a blur, counting down from a ridiculously small starting point. Seconds, not even minutes. My unassigned status was gone. The game had started, and I was already losing. Thank you for watching. If this story sent a chill down your spine, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more horror stories. See you next time.